skin was unusually red. I do not think much about this at the time, as I had seen the man around the pool before, and I think my dad may have even had a conversation with him at some point. But he continued to stare, and it made me so uncomfortable that I had to get out of the spa and sat outside waiting for my dad. I started seeing him everywhere. Wherever I was, he was. Grocery stores, malls, outside of my school, and always at my Friday swimming lessons. I never told my dad about seeing him everywhere. I thought maybe I was overreacting, and I was very naive to the obvious danger. I remember one instance where I was in the department store with my mom, and I saw him down every end of the aisles we were down, and said nothing. Red flags started to go off when he decided to carry a camera around with him. He would always be in a completely black outfit with his camera bag around his neck watching me. One day, I was at the mall with a few of my friends, when one of them pointed him out before I even noticed him. I told them about the man and the way he looked at me, and my friend's older sister advised me to tell security so that he would be removed. As soon as he saw them coming, he got up and left. Fast forward 2 years or so, haven't seen my stalker friend for so long now that he's becoming a distant memory. Until I get a call into my school office because my uncle was here to pick me up early. As soon as I saw him there, arms open, in my fucking school office waiting for me, I felt sick. I had forgotten about this man, and 2 years later he had the nerve to try to collect me from school. And he had his camera. I marched right past him and to the office woman and simply said, "This man is not my uncle," and walked back to class. At lunch, as he was outside my school, he would wave to try to get me to come over, or he would hold up a chocolate bar as some type of child bait. So his random school appearances continued to the point as school needed to contact my parents and let me know about the situation. My dad was distraught, having actually spoken to this man before, and demanded the police be contacted so we could get a restraining order or something. That's when we found out the man was a convicted sex offender. The police took his camera and found hundreds and hundreds of photos of me, some which were zoomed up into my bedroom window at my own house. We got the restraining order, and thankfully, I haven't seen him since.
When I was 5 years old, my sister 4, I woke up on a stretcher in the hospital. All I remember at first are incredibly bright lights and sterile white walls. A pretty nurse with curly blonde hair and bright red lipstick kept worrying over me. I think I may have been strapped down, but I don't remember. I have no idea why I didn't put up a fight because I do remember there being a tube down my throat. To this day, I can't stand the thought of gagging or throwing up. For some reason, I couldn't understand why she was so worried. I just wanted to make her laugh. So every time she would give me the next shot in my arm, I would try to gasp, look at her, and then roll my eyes and pretend to pass out. I'd open my eyes and let out a muffled laugh, and she would smile. My dad would randomly burst into the room. He looked terrified. I didn't understand why he kept leaving until way later when I was told they had my sister and I in opposite rooms. Apparently, my heart stopped 9 times. It wasn't long until my sister and I found out that our mother had tried to overdose us on her pills. It was another 2 decades before I realized she didn't have a psychotic break like I thought. She was mad at my dad for drinking and wanted to get back at him.
This was some backstory This was a few years ago, and I was around 12 or 13 at the time. I grew up in a small town, technically a village, and about an hour and a half away from a big city in the US. On summer days, my best friend and I would also venture around our woodsy neighborhood and do typical kid things. I had a little sister who was around 7 or 8 at the time, and she'd also had a little sister the same age. My friend's name was Sarah, my little sister Sammy, and her little sister Alex. We would occasionally let them tag along on our adventures. Our favorite thing to do was walk to our neighbor's house. We'll call them the Smiths, and use their trampoline. It was in our neighborhood, but the houses are pretty spread out and with dense forests in between. We set off towards their place, and it was about a 20-30 minute walk, longer on the way back because we had to then go uphill. One day, Sarah and I decided to let Sammy and Alex come to the trampoline with us. They weren't really allowed very far from our houses with an adult or us with them. We played on it for an hour or two and decided we were thirsty or hungry, one of the two, and decided to head back to Sarah's and Alex's house for snacks. We were almost back to their house, but the last stretch before the house was the longest amount of isolated road with a creek flowing by and no houses outlining the road, just dense forest. As soon as we cleared this area, we'd be right on top of their house. As we were almost through the wooded part, we could see their house up ahead. A woman with short black hair and sunglasses was walking her baby in a stroller. She was walking towards us, and would pass us soon. I didn't recognize her as someone who lived in our neighborhood, and I know everyone, but lots of people from surrounding neighbors take walks here because of the woods. She passes by us normally, but right after she does, she says, "Oh hey kids, I'm a little lost, what road is this?" None of us were very alarmed. The neighborhood is windy and can be confusing. Plus, she was a lady with a baby, not some scary, creepy man. We told her the name of the road, and she told us that she was really lost and needed to get home to take care of her baby. She then asked if we could escort her to her house because she didn't think she'd be able to find it even with directions. Sarah agreed to help, but I feel really uncomfortable and was told never to talk to strangers even if they are a woman. I told the lady none of us could help because Sarah's dad was expecting us home soon. Sarah gave me a weird look, but I think she caught on because she said, "Oh yeah, we can actually help. Sorry." At this point, I wasn't really freaked, just knew I shouldn't be helping strangers to their house. I went to step in front of the younger two. They were trailing behind us, and I wanted to push them forward so we can start walking away. I stepped closer to the lady in my efforts and could then look into her stroller. That's when my heart sank. The baby was fake. It was a baby doll. It was wrapped in blankets. I could see that it was plastic. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I found myself screaming, "Run!" I made sure Sammy and Alex were ahead of me and we were sprinted for their house. Her dad was working in the garage on something and we ran in out of breath and crying. I coolly just said, "There was a lady trying to get us to go home with her who had a fake baby." He grabbed a golf club from his caddy that was lying out and told us to get in the house. We all went in and a few minutes later he came back. He said he was heading towards the lady and then she spotted him. She was already on the phone with someone. Out of nowhere, a white van appeared, screeching up, and she threw the stroller and then they sped off. It was definitely a creepy experience, and I don't know what the lady's intentions were, but I don't think they were innocent. This truly scared the shit out of us. We didn't wander around the neighborhood nearly as much, and when we did, we always looked out for something. Anyway, weird lady with a fake baby. Let's not meet again, please.
When I was 7 or 8 years old, there was this creek in the middle of a forest behind my house that I used to play at all the time. On one side of the creek was bordered by a dirt wall about 5 feet high, and I used to jump over the creek from one side to the other, and it was fun to pretend that I knew parkour. Then one day I went out to the creek, and lying in the middle of it was a brand new football. Now I want to mention an important detail. The creek's depth made it so that the top half of the football stuck out of the water. The top half was completely dry, so it wasn't like the football had just rolled into the creek. It was placed there. Written on the top of the football in black permanent marker were the words, "Johnny Jumps," and underneath the phrase was a phone number. Now this is weird, my name is Johnny. I picked up the football and went home, obviously very confused and kinda scared. Whoever put that football there had been watching me. They placed it where I would jump over the creek when I played by myself. I grabbed the cordless phone and called the number. It was the number for Homeland Security. Yeah, fucking Homeland Security, the fucking number you call when a terrorist attack is about to go down. It was basically Super 911. I quickly tried to explain my situation to the lady on the phone, and she told me that it's okay and to not call the number again. I instantly ran and told my mother what had just happened, and she was just as confused as I. My parents are divorced, but when my dad came over later that evening, I told him what had happened as well. He asked me to give him the football, and he said that he was going to look into it. I gave it to him and he left a few minutes later. I kept asking him if he figured anything out, and he would just give me vague answers or try to dodge the question altogether. This turned into a few weeks of me asking, which turned into a few months. Then he started acting like he didn't know what I was talking about. That was 10 years ago, and if I ask him about it now, he says that he has zero memory of this ever happening. He doesn't remember the football at all. My mother does, but only vaguely. To this day, I have absolutely zero idea who was watching me or why they put the football in the creek, or why they wrote Johnny Jumps on it, and I especially have no fucking idea why they would put the number for Homeland Security on the ball. I never really thought too much about this incident until I was older, when I realized how fucking creepy this whole thing was. I continued to live by that creek for a few more years and continued to play and jump over the creek until we moved away. There were no teenagers in my neighborhood. I was the oldest kid. All my neighbors were very friendly and I knew them all personally. None of them were ever creepy to me, and nothing else strange ever happened to me in the 12 years I lived there.
Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I'm your guide, Derek Hayes. In fact, a good evening to you. I trust that everyone is successfully traversing the gauntlet that is 2020. Things are getting scary, times are getting hard, and people are struggling. So do me a favor, shut out the outside world for an hour or so. Let me share some downright terrifying tales with you. Let's consider it paranormal therapy. So have a seat there on the sofa. Relax. Take a deep breath. With tonight's kickoff, we begin in the state of Michigan. And folks, let me tell you, this is a weird one. The following was submitted by Allie.
Hi, my name is Allie. I live in Michigan. I wanted to call in a story. It seems kind of weird. I don't know if it goes with the show, but the more I think about it, the more paranormal it seems to me. You'll see once I explain it, but this happened about 15 years ago. I was just a kid. We moved to my house that we live in now. I have a room on the second story of the house with a roof that sort of like comes out right under my window. And this story is actually the reason why I always sleep with my blinds closed at night, is because one night when I was younger, I woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window, and it sounds so silly, but there was 3 mummies sitting outside my window on the roof. They all were gray, sort of like just super skinny, sitting sort of with their knees up and kind of looking at each other, very bony looking, and you could tell they were wrapped. My memory is that they were wrapped in something, but I just remember them being mainly gray. They weren't very big either. It was almost like they were sort of child-sized, I'd say. I never thought about it again after I told my mom in the morning that that's what I saw, because I just remember being so afraid and going back to sleep. And I think I eventually got the courage to shut the blinds or something. I don't remember really what happened after that, but I was always told that it was a dream and not to think about it. But I guess what creeps me out about it is that I remember being awake and being able to move because I was scared and I wanted to scoot out of their sight because it was mummies by my window. Yeah, it sounds silly, but I just thought I'd call it in. Personally, I'm a Christian. I believe in angels and devils, and I believe that sometimes the devil knows what will scare you and can portray itself in that way. So I don't know, maybe it was something like that, or maybe I really was dreaming. But anyways, I love the podcast. Thank you for everything you do, and I thought I'd share that story. Let me know what you think.
Thank you, Allie. You were right. That is a weird one. Mummies. Now, I think we've pretty much heard it all at this point. And assuming that these weren't a trio of mummified human corpses that somehow managed to find themselves on Allie's roof, what other possibilities may we explore to explain this odd occurrence? The obvious choice here would be sleep paralysis, but Allie mentioned that she moved in her bed to hide from the creatures. Not typical behavior for someone experiencing an episode. Now, of course, there's the standard explanation given that this was a trick played on a little girl. But it's been years. Why has no one confessed to it? Not to mention, how would a trick like that be implemented in the first place? Then there is the alien gray theory, and this one has captured a majority of my imagination. The description of the creatures isn't all that dissimilar from reports of grays in the past. The skinny body, the gray skin. But perhaps one detail yells out more than any other. The mention of the knees of the creature being pulled to its chest. I immediately thought of countless mummies found in the arid regions of Peru. Many of those mummies are also positioned with their knees to their chest. And for some of them, that's the least strange thing about them. Not only are many of these mummified bodies, of which most died some 2,000 years ago, not only are they found with red or strawberry blonde hair, something that isn't known to be found in the Americas until at least the Europeans arrived in the 15th century, but some of them have been found with elongated skulls that can only be described as alien. The following clip was pulled from a talk given by archaeologist Brian Forrester and comes courtesy of Idea City.
Are these an unknown species? Is it perhaps a hoax? Are these alien beings? Might God have been an astronaut? So I invited Brian Forster to come out here and tell us about his finds all the way from Peru.
So I became fascinated a number of years ago with what's called cranial deformation, because it's a practice that was done on every inhabited continent, most commonly 2,000 years ago, but in some cases much farther back. And what we found is that in general, this was only done amongst the royalty of a civilization. I was very intrigued because, of course, if there was only one of them, on the planet, you could say, well, that's a freak of nature or something. But in fact, there are hundreds, if not thousands of them in institutions and museums around the world. And what's most intriguing is that the largest ones come from one graveyard in Peru. Also, they have done DNA testing, and so far they found the mother's DNA, which they have mitochondrial, which they have not been able to fully analyze, but there's a complete absence of the father, which is odd. And this is the size of what this looks like. The head is the size of the torso, if not bigger.
Well, the thing that stimulated me and got me motivated to get in touch with you was the reference that I came across, which says some genetic tests that have been done have found that the DNA in the skulls that were, quote, unknown in any human, primate, or animal known so far.
That's true. Initial DNA testing has shown that there are segments of DNA from at least one Paracas skull that doesn't fit Homo sapiens or Denisovan or any known humanoid.
Now, this short segment barely touches on the amount of information shared in this talk. I've linked to it in the show notes for tonight's episode, so do yourself a favor and check it out. Now, Allie, I'm not suggesting that Peruvian mummies visited your childhood home, but I couldn't help but make that connection. So thank you again for making that possible. Now I have a special alert. Somehow tonight's episode was infiltrated by monsters. Stick around and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But for the time being, let's share a call that takes us up to the night skies. The following is Gabriel's submission from the state of Florida.
Hello, Derek. My name is Gabriel. Another one of my very creepy stories. I was about 16 years old, and I was living in Cape Coral, Florida at the time. And I was sitting in my living room and I was watching television. At the time, we had DirecTV, and if something blew into the dish on top of the house, you'd lose signal and have to research for it. And my dad was clever enough to put markings on the dish, so in case the dish was ever moved, you climb up on the roof and you can move it back to its position. You know exactly where it was marked, and then the TV signal would pick back up. And I was watching television, and it was during one of the commercials, and my satellite signal went out. So I'm like, crap, all right, something hit the dish. So I walk outside and there's no wind. So I'm like, it was probably one of the owls, because we had those little field owls all over the place and they smack in the windows and whatnot. So I go outside and everything's dead silent. Street lights on, right at the foot of my driveway. And I walk around the side of the house and I grab the ladder and I put it up on the roof, lean it against the house. And when I look up, it was the strangest thing ever. There was just nothing above my house. And this was middle of night and you could see all the stars. But in this one area above my house, there was nothing at all. I could look down the street and I could see the stars. I can look both directions, see the stars, but directly above my house, it was just pitch black. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a alien or a UFO. I have no conceivable idea what this was. And because it was pitch black, there was no way for me to tell its elevation. I didn't know how close it was to my house or whatnot. It was just like this big circular area around the top of my house, looking straight up, where there was just nothing. It was like that deep void kind of black. So I'm staring at this, and it's dead silent outside, and I'm staring at this for a good 3 minutes. And all the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I didn't hear crickets, no sounds whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, the stars started to reappear in this void, and it was almost like it dissipated, like it maybe was like black smoke or something. You didn't see any wisps from it. It was just like it faded away, and then everything came back into view. And when it disappeared, then you could hear all the crickets again outside. You could hear all just like the wind blowing gently. All the sound return to the area. So at that point, I didn't even bother to take down the ladder. I just looked down and walked straight back into my house, and the TV signal was back. I don't know to this day what that was. I'm not sure I even want to know what that was. It baffles the imagination. It was one of those things where I just wish somebody else would have seen it, because I could not make heads or tails of what this was. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gabriel. This almost sounds like one of those black triangles that we hear about so often. But I'm also wondering if something else might be at work here. Could the dark mass that Gabriel witnessed have been a swarm or a flock of animals? Many birds and bat species flock in thick numbers in the thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands. I've seen flocks of starlings back east that blot out the sun nearly completely. And for anyone that's ever visited Florida, given the size of the insects down there, a swarm of those things is certainly within the realm of possibility. But I struggle to believe that given the quiet atmosphere Gabriel described, he couldn't hear said birds, bugs, or bats. An obvious hole in my less than airtight theory. So with that, I simply throw my hands in the air and move on. But thank you again, Gabriel, for that great submission. Now, before we make way for our next entry, I want to remind everyone that we have many Monsters Among Us items, such as t-shirts, beanies, totes, and mugs, available in the shop. Just visit monstersamonguspodcast.com and click on the shop tab for more details. Now, our next call has a real eerie feel to it, but don't take my word for it. The following is Michael's submission from Parts Unknown.
Hey, Derek, this is Michael. I'm calling because I was just listening to the most recent episode and I heard Joe's call about the mist figures and the knock after he saw them. I am calling because I heard that and it really freaked me out, honestly. I grew up in the Gold Beach area. I lived there for 10 years when I was younger. And one time, something very similar happened to me. I was camping up at the Lobster Creek Campground, about 10, 15 miles up the Rogue River there in Gold Beach. And I was staying in a cabin with my girlfriend. We were the only ones up at the campground. It was completely deserted. Generator wasn't on, anything like that, so there was no power. And we're staying in one of the cabins. And there was the front door. We walk in the front door, and there's a hallway. And we were to the left side. And we were in there. We had the door closed. So our door and the front door were both closed. And we were just laying there, hanging out. And it's probably 2 a.m, and we hear the front door open and then slam shut. And we just kind of stop. And we get really nervous and really freaked out. And we hear footsteps coming down the hallway towards our door. And then we hear just 3 loud bangs, just bang, bang, bang on our door. And we don't move. We are absolutely terrified. So we just stay awake the entire night because we don't know if there's someone out there or anything like that. We don't hear any noises afterwards, just the 3 loud bangs. And so we get in the morning, probably about 7 o'clock in the morning. We could have stayed there until noon, but we really just wanted to get out of there while it was, as soon as it got light outside so that we could see and not crash or anything like that because it's a pretty windy road to get up there. And we get up about 7 o'clock in the morning and we go outside and it's a very, very deep fog. Like, can't see more than 20 feet ahead of you. And I get really nervous about driving in it just because I had an older car and didn't have the best anything, really. But we're like, we can't stay here anymore. It's too freaky. So we get into our car and we start driving away. And at the gate of the campground, I had to get out of my car and open up the bar, drive through, get back out and close it. And as I get back into my car after closing it, I look in my rearview mirror and it looks like there's a person standing there behind the bar. But I can't make out any details because it's super foggy and everything like that. But it just terrified me, honestly. So when Joe called in about seeing figures in the mist and then hearing 3 loud knocks afterwards, it really just kind of got me riled up. So that's my story. Joe, I heard you. I know what it's like. Been through that. Not the only one. Thanks, Derek. Have a great night.
Thank you, Michael. Now, I really enjoy it when a connection is made through stories on the show. How obscure is it that both Joe and Michael had such similar experiences? So now we have to ask ourselves, as we do each time similar stories are shared, is this a new phenomenon or experience that people are having and simply not reporting? Or is it simply a spooky coincidence? No matter the answer, I had a great time hearing Michael's tale. So thank you again for sharing it. Okay, a while back I promised some monsters, and I aim to deliver. For our first beastly encounter, we venture north to the woods of Michigan. This call was submitted anonymously.
Hey, Derek. I live in Milford, Michigan, and when we first bought my house, this was probably 2 years ago, and it was probably around fall, me and my daughter, who at the time was 4, went out behind our house to this trail, and it wasn't a huge plot of woods, but it was a good space, so we were walking around, and it was starting to get dusk, and at that time, I think it actually was, dark. We started to see trees moving all around us, and trees or leaves falling off, and trees moving around. And then I would say 10 feet away, and this is really dense forest, so you couldn't see, especially in dark, more than a couple feet. And we heard the loudest, deepest snarl growl I've ever heard. Not like a dog. I don't even know how to explain it. And my daughter immediately started screaming and crying. And so I told her to run back to the house, and I didn't want to turn away because I know you don't turn away from predators. So I slowly backed up, but it took off crashing, and it was, whatever it was extremely large. My daughter still brings it up. She had nightmares. She constantly checks to make sure the door's locked. She doesn't want to sleep alone.